We're not able to keep tabs on every single person who comes in, certainly. We have all sorts of investigations into certain people who get in, and we try to work very hard on both sides of the border to support DHS's efforts and to some extent our neighbors south of the border from preventing them from coming in.
That was FBI Director Christopher Wray saying the Biden administration is not able to keep tabs on all the illegal immigrants who end up in the country. And while the honesty is welcomed, it is a concerning declaration. Director Wray made the comments when he was facing questioning at the Senate Intelligence Committee's Worldwide Threats hearing. The situation at the US-Mexico border is one of the biggest political and humanitarian issues facing the country. During the 2021 fiscal year, the Biden administration faced more than 1.7 million migrant encounters. The next year, in 2022, it rose to 2.3 million. There is a record amount of immigrants crossing into the US, with an expectation the number of yearly encounters could rise to 6 million if Joe Biden ends Title 42. Title 42 is a health order that was instated by Donald Trump in March 2020. It basically means that border agents can turn away migrants, sending them to Mexico or to their home countries because of the threat of COVID-19. The policy is set to end in May, and if it does, the daily apprehensions could rise to 18,000. In turn, the yearly number would hit 6 million. But the number that is incredibly concerning is the number of gotaways. That is the number of illegal immigrants who enter the country either completely in secret or they are given a court date but basically never turn up and seep into the shadows of the country to live. Fox News has reported that there are 1.2 million gotaways under the Biden administration, which means 1.2 million immigrants are living completely illegally in the US. It's probably impossible to know the exact number, which is something I asked Federalist reporter Emily Jasinski when I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago. Ms. Jasinski has seen firsthand the severity of what's happening at the border, having spent time filming a documentary in Mexico and gaining the knowledge of how migrants are crossing into the country undetected. How? How can Border Patrol agents not encounter everyone that enters the country illegally? Well, they are relying on people smugglers. Do you think the estimation of how many gotaways in the United States is a lot more?
That's a really good question. My instinct is to say absolutely, that we have a really hard time grasping the scope of this because, you are also paying, in some cases, the cartels to take you across the border. Now, one way that especially people like Joe Biden, proponents of immigration, would argue, they would say because they have made the legal pathways to seek asylum and to seeking things like humanitarian parole so easy that we generally know how many people are coming in. But there are still cases where people feel they have to pay the cartel to ferry them over the Rio Grande or another part of the border illegally.
The Biden administration has been under the microscope the last few years when it comes to the border. A federal judge in Florida has today ruled that the White House's practice of putting migrants on parole and letting them into the country is a meaningless line in the sand. Judge T. Kent Wetherill, in a lawsuit, wrote a scathing review of Joe Biden's own border policy called Alternatives to Detention. This policy is meant to be used in a case-by-case basis to try and alleviate the amount of migrants congregating at the border. But according to Florida officials, it meant that more than 100,000 migrants have been released into the Sunshine State. Judge Wetherill's ruling read, "The evidence establishes that defendants have effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand and little more than a speed bump for aliens flooding into the country by prioritizing alternatives to detention over actual detention and by releasing more than 1 million aliens into the country on parole or pursuant to the exercise of prosecutorial discretion under a wholly inapplicable statute without even initiating removal proceedings." Republican Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody backed up the ruling with a statement that read, "Today's ruling affirms what we have known all along. President Biden is responsible for the border crisis and his unlawful immigration policies make this country less safe. A federal judge is now ordering Biden to follow the law, and his administration should immediately begin securing the border to protect the American people."